What's up guys, the Hunted Reaper here, and in today's video I'm going to ask a simple question about a major video game. That video game is Destiny 2, but I will be talking about Destiny as a franchise as well. The question is, what if Destiny as a franchise was actually more like Borderlands and Halo? I mentioned Borderlands and Halo specifically because of the fact that Destiny allowed their marketing strategy to be based around that. They basically were saying Destiny is going to be Borderlands mixed with Halo, developed by Bungie, and everyone lost their shit. But we soon found out Destiny was like a generic cereal compared to the name brand Halo series, and the only thing it had in common with Borderlands was a randomly generated gun system that was subpar in every single way. So today's video is how Destiny would be different if they only took the best possible traits from both video games and combined it into the game that we wanted, but unfortunately never got. I hope you guys enjoy this video. Make sure to give me a like and subscribe. But without any further ado, let's get into it. When the first Destiny was in development, Bungie said it's gonna be like Borderlands. A lot of people were speculating that, and all the gaming magazines and sites were all saying Destiny's gonna be like Borderlands met Halo and had an awesome baby. We came to find out that this was not the case, and it was nothing like Borderlands, but if Destiny was like Borderlands, we would definitely see a lot of awesome changes, and it would be a much better game, in fact. One of the things that Borderlands does very well is they have like awesome characters. The skill trees for their characters are very flushed out, and there's a lot of different options. So, you know, you might use a character, like you might use the Commando character, for instance, and focus on the saber turret, but someone else might use that same class and focus on their gunplay and their ability to heal. And so by the end of the game, you can pick the same, you know, out of the same four characters, but the characters are completely different in the end. Destiny did something completely the opposite, which was they made every single class kind of the same, especially the subclasses. The subclasses in the game are lacking so much. It's terrible. What's even crazier is when they were making Destiny 2, they had a chance to rework the subpar classes, but they didn't, and they just felt the same, and they're boring, and they're still sad. Now, if Destiny just took the leap of faith and decided to, hey, we're going to actually make a fully fleshed out skill tree, what they could have done is they could have completely nuked it for multiplayer. So basically, when you're playing player versus player matches, your skill tree doesn't matter, and you only have a core set of skills that you can change up a little bit, right? Which would be a way to kind of balance multiplayer. But when it comes to single player, you would have characters that could be fully decked out in different ways, and it's really hard to, you know, make a multiplayer slash single player character that's fun to play with because of the fact that you need to kind of ground him or ground them. So it's hard to make a badass single player character that you can also transfer to multiplayer, because then you just have an overpowered character and no one's having fun. I feel like Bungie decided to really focus on multiplayer when they should have been investing their time in co-op and the amount of guns that were in the game as well. How Bungie kind of advertised the fact that they were going to have a lot of guns in Destiny. It was going to be a loot-based experience, and we found out it was completely random like Borderlands, but it was completely broken unlike Borderlands. And if you ask anyone that's played Borderlands, and if you've played it yourself, you know there's a lot of fun guns to get, especially legendaries, and even the normal guns are fun to get sometimes. And especially when you get an exotic, there's an awesome feeling. But what Destiny did is they made every single gun ancillary, especially legendary weapons, which basically became, after a certain level, legendary weapons are more common than common weapons, and it took a lot of the fun out of it. And grinding for exotic weapons was so annoying because, you know, you could do a really hard raid and get like a blue engram and be pissed. Whereas in Borderlands, rare guns were guaranteed for raid bosses. It kind of screwed Destiny over in the end. If Destiny was actually more like Borderlands, you'd see classes like the Hunter with very, you know, stealthy skill trees, while the Titan can be more like a tank and maybe have more deployable items, maybe like more deployable shields, ways to make cooperative play even more fun. And with that, they could also have upped the difficulty for solo and cooperative missions, because after a certain amount of time in Destiny, you can't get any harder because it becomes impossible for the player to deal with all those enemies. But if you start to get more intricate into the skill trees and allow players to become more overpowered, they can deal with more enemies and feel like they're doing more as a byproduct. So they kind of screw themselves over by limiting themselves only to characters that were good for multiplayer, rather than having different characters for multiplayer and the story. If Destiny was more like Borderlands as well, they would have a lot more guns, and they wouldn't just have the set exotics. They would have different exotics with different class benefits and stuff like that, and I feel like they didn't do that at all. They hyped us up for it, and they just completely shot us down. And while getting an exotic in the beginning of Destiny's life cycle was awesome and fun, it's really boring now. And I started another playthrough of Borderlands, and I got an exotic for the first time again, and I was like, this is awesome. And every exotic that I've gotten in the game has been unique and cool and fun to use in a different experience. And then when I go back to a game like Destiny, it's kind of just exotics are the same that they've always been, and so there isn't any gun diversity. So if Destiny was more like Borderlands, it would have a lot more gun diversity, it would be a lot more fun to play, and I think that they would have a very separate multiplayer and story kind of loadout and build for the characters, which in turn would kind of help the game itself. So basically, Bungie screwed up Destiny by putting an emphasis on PvP instead of PvE. And one thing Destiny really lacks is enemy diversity, and if it was more like Borderlands, we would see a lot more enemies. And I remember enemies being very interesting in Borderlands. I remember not being able to tell what was coming next. And while in Destiny 1 we were introduced to new enemies, they kind of felt generic. I mean, the husks or the hollows, they looked exactly like every other generic space zombie, and you know, the Cabal were just obviously taken off the brutes from Halo. It felt like copy and paste, and there weren't unique, genuine enemies, and that made shooting at them a lot more boring. Especially if there weren't that many enemy types, and we're seeing it today still, that in Destiny there's not many different types of enemies, and honestly, when they do throw different types of enemies in, they just have like bigger health bars, and it's not what Borderlands was like at all. So there's that. So if Destiny wanted to be more like Borderlands, they would definitely have more enemy diversity, maybe less powerful enemies, but a different variation, or certain variations that would challenge the player instead of just throwing, you know, fucking mobs of people at it, just hoping that they could get through another match. It's terrible, the dynamic they've created with a game that was funded so well, and they were given a great like finishing point, because honestly, if they made a game that was like Halo and had the gameplay of Borderlands, it probably would have been one of the best games of all time. And that's where I get into Halo. What if Destiny was more like Halo? Well, first off, there would be a better lore to the story. The story in Destiny is so fucking terrible. It's like, it's arduous to go through, and it's boring, and it's monotonous. And if anyone's, you know, if you've obviously played Halo if you're watching this video, and if you haven't, you should definitely play it. But Halo grabbed people with the story, because it made you really care about the characters and the environment, and you cared about being Master Chief. And even in a Halo where there was customization, like Halo Reach, they actually had you care for the player. So it's not like they can't just make, you know, a standalone game, because they can. You know, Halo Reach was basically Bungie saying, we can make a standalone game with new characters and new story and everything, and still make you cry at the end. And that's an awesome thing to do, and that's how people had their faith in Bungie. But I guess ever since they paired with Activision, they screwed themselves over. But the story was lacking in Destiny, and there's no reason to continue on. And you could look at it with the same lens when you talk about Borderlands, because the story in Borderlands is actually really well written, especially number 2, with Handsome Jack being the main enemy, and the Warrior being like the main super enemy.
I can't just have some psychopathic murderers getting to the vault before I do. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's cute that y'all think you're the heroes of this little adventure, but you're not. And
that's what Destiny lacked as well. Like, they don't have any cool super enemies, and if they do, it's just a very boring, annoying, monotonous raid that after, you know, 3 or 4 times playing, it gets boring. And I think if Destiny was more like Halo and Borderlands, they'd have shorter missions, but with more bosses and more enemy diversity. And this would kind of break the whole monotonous cycle that everyone's complaining about when they're talking about Destiny. They're talking about how we're doing the same missions over and over again. And in a game like Borderlands, where they make a bunch of missions, and some of them might not be as intricate as the ones in Destiny, people aren't getting bored because of the fact that they can do different things at different times. Destiny limits people that so terribly, and that's why if Destiny was like Borderlands mixed with Halo, it would be the best game ever. And I hope someone at Bungie sees this and decides to, you know, get their shit together and maybe changed the direction for Destiny 3, because honestly, it was a great premise of a game, but it got shot down, and the only reason it's still being played right now is because the amount of people that bought into the hype. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm the Hunted Reaper, and if you guys want, click a like button, click the subscribe button, and continue to watch.